Good evening, class. Today what we're going to be learning about is the volume of rectangular prisms. Our objective is to use the formulas learned in this lesson to find the volume of a rectangular prism. But first we need to recap a couple of things. First, remember that volume is measured in units cubed. We discussed this in class earlier today, but it's good to have a reminder. So for example, you could have inches cubed or feet cubed or any unit cubed, whatever the unit is in the problem that you have. We also need to remember what is a prism compared to a pyramid. This is a prism right here, and it has two bases here and here, and a pyramid only has one base. So keep that in mind as we are working through these problems, that we are finding the volume of rectangular prisms. Alright class, now we're ready to dive into our very first formula. For this formula, we'll be using V equals L times W times H. The V stands for volume, L stands for length, W stands for width, and H stands for height. So our formula is volume equals length times width times height. We can see this down here. What we do is we multiply the length down here times the width over here times the height right here, and that gives us our volume. So now let's dive into our first practice problem. You can follow along in the worksheet that I handed out in class earlier today. This is practice problem 1, and it's labeled number 1 on your worksheet. So let's look at this rectangular prism. I see that the dimensions are 3 inches by 5 inches by 8 inches. So what I want you to do is fill out what the length, width, and height are. Go ahead and pause the video, and when you come back, we'll see if you got it right. Okay, now let's check our answers. Our length is 3 inches, our width is 5 inches, and our height is 8 inches. Go ahead and double check on your worksheet now and make sure you came to the correct answer. Now we're going to look at the volume and see if we can figure out the volume from these 3 different numbers. Now remember, our formula is volume equals length times width times height. So we have to multiply these 3 numbers together to come to our volume. So let's work through this together. We have to plug the numbers into the formula. You can see here that I labeled each different part and all the numbers line up. So our length is 3 inches, our width is 5 inches, and our height is 8 inches. So what I'm going to do to work through this slowly is I'm going to multiply 3 times 5. I'm not going to worry about the 8 for now and just start with 3 times 5. So I get 15 times 8. So now in order to finish off this little formula, I'm going to multiply 15 times 8. And I come to our answer, which is 120 inches cubed. It's important to remember that you include the unit and cubed. Otherwise, I don't know if you're talking about 120 turtles or 120 unicorns or 120 Twinkies. I have absolutely no clue, so it's really important that you remember to put the units whenever you answer a question like this. Now that I've presented the answer, make sure you pause the video and fill in all the information given, and double check that your answer is correct. I want you to keep this for your notes, so I want to make sure all the information that you wrote down is accurate. This is just practice, so don't worry about getting it wrong yet. We're going to try a couple more times before you start on your worksheet. Okay. Now we're ready to start on our second practice problem. Here our rectangular prism is 4 feet by 8 feet by 2 feet. So go ahead and pause the video and fill out the length, width, and height of this rectangular prism. Okay, now that you've filled that out, let's double check your answers. The length is 4 feet. The width is 8 feet, and the height is 2 feet. So again, we're going to plug this into our formula. Volume equals length times width times height. So let's see here. Go ahead and pause the video and fill in the numbers in the formula just as they are here, and play the video when you've got that filled out. Alright, now that you've filled out those numbers, let's see if you got it correct. So our volume is 4 feet times 8 feet times 2 feet. And again, I'm just going to multiply the first 2 numbers to keep things simple. And that's this next step here. So we have 32 times 2. Go ahead and pause the video again and see if you can finish off the rest of the problem by yourself. Alright, let's see what answer you came to. I got 64 feet cubed. And again, it's important that we remember what kind of unit we're using. So we used inches in the last example, now we're using feet. And it's still cubed because we're still working with the volume of the object. Alright, now I'm going to turn you loose and we're going to try the third practice problem. Now I want you to try this third practice problem on your own. But before you pause the video, I'm going to set it up and explain it a little bit. Our rectangular prism is 9 inches by 6 inches by 4 inches. You'll notice that on your worksheet and on this slide, I haven't written out all the steps. That's because I want you to try and write out all the steps, just like we did in the other problems. For example, right here, I wrote out each step. And I want you to write that out on your worksheet on your own. I'll still review the answer with you, but I want you to try this on your own. So go ahead and pause the video now and see if you can come to the answer. Again, this is just practice, so don't get too frustrated. Just keep trying, okay? Okay, now that you've had some time to work this out, let's work through this together and see if you did all the right steps and came to the right answer. So our volume equals length times width times height. And we plug in those numbers. So again, length is 9, width is 6, and the height is 4. So we multiply the first two numbers together, and we get 9 times 6 is 54. Then we still have to multiply that by the height. So 54 times 4 is 216. Now, if you came to 216 and just wrote that down, that is not the correct answer, because remember, we have to include our units. It's a really tricky bit, but it is very important, so I know what you're talking about, okay? Now we're going to be working with our second and, in my opinion, easier formula, okay? So what we have to do is find the volume. Again, same objective, but this time we're just multiplying the base times the height, or another way to write it is V equals B times H. We're going to go over this more in class tomorrow, but I want to get you working with this and practice it just a bit so that way you become familiar with it and we're ready for class tomorrow. So let's say I have a rectangular prism with a base of 24 inches and a height of 50 inches. Now all I have to do is plug that into my formula. So base, or volume equals base times height. So let's plug those numbers in right here. So our base is 24 inches and our height is 50 inches. Multiply those two numbers together, and we come to a volume of 1,200 inches cubed. And again, we still include our units, and we still include that it is cubed, just so we know what we're working with. This isn't going to be on your homework or anything, but I did want to get you at least exposed to this formula so that way we can work with it. And this time, we only have two numbers to multiply together instead of 3, so I think it's a little easier. Like I said, we'll go over this more in class. So let's quickly recap what we learned today, and I will explain the homework. So we learned two new formulas to find volume. The first one is volume equals length times width times height. And our second formula is volume equals base times height. For your homework, you have 3 problems on the worksheet that was sent home with you today. And remember, when you're doing the homework, don't forget your units. It's very, very important. Tomorrow we'll work more with the volume equals base times height formula to get you more comfortable with that. And we'll review the first formula, volume equals length times width times height as well. I can't wait to see you in class tomorrow, and have a good night. Good luck on your homework.